Previously at Laura B. Studios.
I see a lot of people dismiss Gaim as a shallow clone of Ryuki, which is an opinion, and one that more or less throws out the thought of discussing Gaim's themes altogether. As for Mai, people don't like the way that Mai gets treated in Gaim's narrative, and honestly, I get it. I've thought about it a lot. That said, while I'm not gonna get into it in this specific video, if this show, which might I remind you is from 2003, has this level of quality and well-written women, then the big budget studios have no excuse. I also have a really good idea for another essay, and I think that if you didn't like this one, you're gonna hate this next one even more, so look forward to it. Hi everyone, my name is Laura B, aka Twitter user at YTikitaze, which you probably already know if you're watching this video. I would like to once again say thank you to everyone who checked out my top 10 tokusatsu shows of all time video. I really appreciate y'all coming by and supporting my silly little overly complicated personal projects, and I'm pleasantly surprised that anyone actually came by and watched it. So thank you so much for that. Like I said at the end of my top 10, I know that I blew through any crowd I might have had by openly displaying my fondness for several unpopular shows. I also mentioned that if you didn't like it, you'd really not like this next one. But I'm kind of hoping this video won't make people too mad because, if anything, what I'm about to admit is gonna have people leaking my address. I do not care for Kamen Rider Ryuki. Now, if you did not just click away from this video in a blind rage at this opinion, let me explain. There was a lot about Ryuki that I did not dislike. There's some great action. Of course the guy who loves tragic, primary, secondary, grumpy sunshine, red blue yaoi loves Ren Shinji. Alive Alive is a super good song, and I could go on. Ryuki has a lot of really good shit in it. And when you look at it as a direct response to 9/11, it's actually super thematically interesting, especially where Emperor's storyline is concerned, though this video is not about my take on that. Hell, gun to my head, if you ask me to watch an episode of Ryuki, Drive, or Kiva, or You'll Pull the Trigger, I'm picking Ryuki. Easy. It's not like Ryuki lacks depth, or good moments, or an insanity-inducing ship, or anything else that makes me love a Kamen Rider season. Except, well, it's one thing. When I first watched Ryuki, I just get this weird feeling. Yui intrigued me way more than any of the guys did at first, but gradually she just felt more and more out of focus in what was, ostensibly, her own story. Kitaoka's tragedy and his relationship with Goro-chan were really good, and then he'd open his mouth around a woman and I'd want to scream. Kamen Rider Femme is the first female Kamen Rider, so why doesn't Miho make me feel triumphant? Why did I feel like Ren's whole character motivation was half-assed, for reasons beyond me shipping him with Shinji? And why does Asakura make me feel so viscerally uncomfortable? See, Ryuki treats its female characters terribly, and I'm honestly tired of pretending otherwise. What's more is that because Ryuki is as influential as it is, to every season of Rider that came after it and to Japanese media as a whole, that awful treatment of women has carried over to this very day. Geats, which was just a few years ago now, felt like a huge setback in terms of how women are treated in Rider, and in ways you can trace right back to 2002. Hell, I'm a known Gaim enjoyer, and it's often said that Gaim is the most sexist Kamen Rider has ever been, or will be, but I disagree. I think a lot of Gaim's problems have a source, and even though that source changed the game forever, that doesn't mean it's beyond being criticized. So before we get into this, first off, here's a few things I want to make clear. Firstly, this video will contain spoilers. Like, a lot of them, probably. If you haven't seen Ryuki and you want to go in blind, feel free to put this video on pause and form your own opinion before coming back to mine. Secondly, on the subject of opinions, this one is mine. But I'm just one guy, and if you disagree, I totally understand. Just be cool and normal, even if you disagree, and we'll be okay. Lastly, I just really want to emphasize that this is not a personal attack on anyone. If you love Ryuki, you're not a bad person or a misogynist or anything like that. You're someone who enjoys something that I can't, and I honestly envy you for that. So just remember, I am not trying to cancel anyone, and I am not trying to attack anyone. It's not about you, it's about the writing. Unless you're Inoue Toshiki, but I kinda doubt that he'd listen to anyone who's not a man talk for this long. So, with all that in mind, let's break down how Ryuki's blueprint fails Rider's women.
So, What is Ryuki about anyway?
Before I start tearing Ryuki's treatment of its women to shreds, here's a quick recap of Ryuki's story just so that we're all on the same page. Kamen Rider Ryuki is about an idiot named Kido Shinji, who somehow went through college and got a journalism degree because he sure works at a magazine. Through a series of events, Shinji ends up making a contract with the monster Drag Rider, drafting him into the Rider War. He meets the original grumpy repressed sad boy secondary rider, Akiyama Ren, who wants Shinji so bad it makes him look like a terrible fiancé, and the mysterious young woman who's at the center of it all, Kanzaki Yui. But more on both of them later. See, the way the Rider War works is that if you win, by being the last rider standing, you get a wish granted. Anything you could dream of, be it eternal life, a fun game, to be a hero, or to get someone to wake up from a coma. Or, well, that's how it's advertised, let's say. The truth is, the Rider War was set up by Yui's brother, Kanzaki Shiro, to make sure Yui wouldn't die on her 20th birthday. See, Yui already died as a child and was replaced with a construct from the Mirror World, which is where all the fighting in the Rider War takes place. Said construct said that she'd die when she turned 20, but Shiro, in his desperation to have his sister live, took that chance, and became determined to save her at any cost. With the strongest possible rider under his command, and the ability to rewind time as many times as he wanted to, Shiro's quest began. In the end, though, Shiro just can't win his own game. No matter how many times he restarts the loop, a certain idiot journalist always gets in the way. What plays out in Ryuki is the last loop. Yui finally gets Shiro to accept her death, Ren wins the Rider War and uses his wish to wake up his girlfriend, and then it's back to the beginning once more. Yui died when she was a kid, Ren and Shinji don't know each other, everybody lives, and the world is at peace. Except it's not, because one thing about Toei is it'll milk a cash cow until it's dry, and the Ryuki cow has a lot of fight left in her. There's so much media covering other loops, other endings, the Rider War starting 3 million other times for reasons that don't super make sense, but whatever. The point is, girl dies, boy makes a contract with her reflection instead of going to therapy, Kamen Rider.
So how am I gonna prove this?
Now, the thing about essays is that they need arguments, and you also need to present the information in a way that makes sense. So first, I broke Ryuki's women up into 4 archetypes that continue to echo across Rider to this day, like a scream at the Grand Canyon. First off, we have My Girlfriend is Dead. This is the category Eri goes into. Now, Eri's not actually dead. She's just in a coma, and we're supposed to believe that Ren joined the Rider War to get her back. But she barely has character beyond nursing school and reminds Ren of Shinji. She exists for Ren to angst over, but he's so... It's 2002, so I guess he's repressing the attraction to men something fierce over Shinji. And this isn't remotely the last time that Rider would pull this. Saki from X-Aid, Kasumi from Build. I made a meme about it, look. Secondly, we have what I call the side chick. This category has Reiko, Sanako, Megumi, and Nanako. They sure are women, and they have a couple character traits for sure, but in the end, they orbit around men like moons, barely given character motivations of their own if they're given character motivations at all. They aren't in the fight, and in some cases, they don't even know there is a fight. Luckily, you don't really see one-note female characters this bad in modern Rider, but they're still part of a larger trend. Female non-combatants who, at the end of the day, exist to prop up and help men. Thirdly, we have the female Rider. This is where Miho comes in. The so-called female Rider curse is a thing of the past, although as Gabu proves, this doesn't mean they're a given either. But when the first one ever was movie exclusive, barely given depth outside of a novel where the depth she's given is sleeping with Shinji, and always dies, like... we could have had a better start than this. And lastly, but most importantly, the tragic magic woman. This is Yui. She is special in some way, and she can't be saved. But the plot moves because a man is trying to save her anyway. You know this type. This is Mai from Gaim. This is Koyomi from Wizard. This is Luna from Saber. She's doomed from the start. She never had a chance. She usually doesn't have a choice. She will sacrifice herself every time. Like I said earlier, Yui intrigued me way more than any of the guys did when I first started Ryuki. I was captivated by her adorable short hair and her snark at Ren Shinji's antics and bullshit. And then, by the end, I was actively pissed off at the way the narrative treated her, and actively pissed off that someone put this shit to paper and aired it. And not because of the angst, no, even as a guy who's weak for siblings, but because none of Ryuki is fair to her. That's while I'll be covering that one last. Then, for each of these archetypes, I'll go into 3 things. First off, we have the blueprint, or a recap of how this trope plays out in Ryuki itself. Then, we'll have the problem, where I go into what each archetype's core issue is. Lastly, we'll have the impact, where I talk about some examples of each archetype in Seasons of Writer in a post-Ryuki world. To prepare for this, I did a bunch of stuff. I didn't just rewatch Ryuki, I rewatched Ryuki and took notes. I watched the movies, which were things I hope the actors were paid well for. I replayed the Ryuki level of Climax Scramble, partially as a joke, but they actually do mention a woman in there, so hey, I'll take that dub. I also rewatched one of the most famous works inspired by Ryuki, Urobuchi Gen's Puella Magi Madoka Magica. I talked to my friends who are more well-versed in feminist theory about the women of Ryuki. I rewatched parts of Gaim so that I could remember exactly how Mai's arc goes. I even voluntarily engaged with Geats content. Geats content. Y'all need to start buying my merch, I'm serious. And I even sought out Kamen Rider Dragon Knight. Yes, Dragon Knight. I wanted to see how Femme was adapted. How things might have been if, she'd gotten the chance to be a character. I didn't finish Dragon Knight, but I watched part of it. And I gotta say, shout out to my girl Maya, she's great. I read books, including part of the cursed text known as the Ryuki novel, and Wikipedia pages. The point is, I dedicated pretty much the entire month of March to knowing my shit. Now that I've done all that, firstly, that's impressive. You should be impressed. I'm impressed. It's a lot of work to analyze a kids show from 2002. But, sunk cost fallacy, let's start with the dead girlfriend.
My girlfriend is dead. The blueprint.
Now, when you think about Akiyama Ren, there's probably one other character who comes to mind. And you know who I'm talking about. That one character whose presence is so important, so vital to Ren's storyline. He doesn't work as a character without this other character. This character drives Ren's plot and facilitates his character growth. His conflicted emotions over this character make up a large chunk of his angst, as well as his softer moments. There's no Ren without this one person. I am, of course, referring to Kido Shinji because Eri is such a non-presence in Ryuki's narrative that it takes her 11 episodes to even be named. Eri's storyline is simple. She was a student at Seimei Medical School and ended up in a lab group with one Kanzaki Shiro. After reporting to her boyfriend, Ren, that the vibes were way off at the lab, she asks him to pick her up early from said lab on her birthday. Which Ren says no to, I guess because the plot wouldn't work otherwise? Anyway, when Ren shows up at the lab, the experiment they're doing, which involves Eri for reasons that also aren't really made clear, is already in progress. He sees her get attacked by Darkwing, sending her into a coma. Shiro tells Ren that he can kill him for what he did to Eri here and now, or he can fight. And, naturally, Ren chooses to fight. Me? I would've killed Shiro. But also, if my girlfriend was like, hey, my creepy lab mate is doing an experiment, and he hasn't elaborated on why I need to be here for it, but if you could pick me up early, that'd be great, I wouldn't fight her on it. Especially if she was all I had, which is what Ren describes her as at one point. But, maybe that's just me. We aren't shown much of Eri's relationship with Ren before her coma. What glimpses we get of her personality are that she hated Ren getting into fights, that she loved riding Ren's bike because it let her be close to him, and that she once told Ren that he needed to do something about his personality. And in a move that is a writing choice that's lived rent-free in my head ever since I first watched Ryuki a couple years ago, that third thing is framed by Ren remembering it after Shinji told him the same thing. So that's certainly something. Anyway, despite her dislike of Ren's attitude and aggression, she says she's fine with Ren the way he is. Eri even says he's lucky he met a weird girl like her. The fact that by participating in the Rider War, he's going against Eri's wishes for him to stop fighting is addressed a couple of times, but in the end, Ren acknowledges that that's her wish, and then keeps fighting. After occasionally being a comatose body that Ren says concerning words to for a long stretch of episodes, and later someone Ren hallucinates when he's in his peak angst era, Eri wakes up once again. I thought this was Shiro's doing, but much like a lot of other Ryuki plot points, this too is just kind of something that happens because it happens. They have a conversation where Eri, despite having just woken up from a coma, asks Ren if something's wrong. And he's not like, forget that, you were in a coma, should we go get a doctor or anything? He just asks her if it seems like he's changed, and she says it seems like he got softer. And then she apologizes for making him worry. Even though, it's partially his fault that she got comaed, so I'd really argue that he should be the one apologizing. But again, we wouldn't be in this situation if it was me, so... The point is, when Eri wakes up, as it turns out she's getting worse, not better. She does not talk about herself or getting back to her studies. She asks how the past year has been, and Ren lies to her, and refuses to elaborate. So many of my Ren notes are just Ren does an action and refuses to elaborate. They just didn't build this guy with that function. She then blames herself for him fighting, because of course she does. Who else's fault could it be? She then tells Ren that he shouldn't fight for her. He should fight for himself. So, cool, sure, I guess. Regardless, soon she's back in her coma. In the end, Ren does win the Rider War, but we barely see Eri wake up as the result of his wish. We do hear her speak as we watch Ren die, though. And in Ryuki's epilogue, showing everyone's peaceful lives in a timeline with no Rider War, Eri isn't there. At all. She is not mentioned, Ren doesn't mention her, she is just not a person who shows up. And Ryuki, famously, ends with Ren and Shinji meeting for the first time all over again. So, tell me, which of these relationships is the one that I'm supposed to be rooting for again?
The problem.
See, the problem with Eri is not one that's exclusive to Kamen Rider. In fact, this trope is so well known that there's a whole Wikipedia page on it. Simply put, Eri is an almost perfect example of a woman being stuffed into the fridge. I say almost because she's not dead. That don't mean she's doing that well. The term fridging was coined in The Best Year Ever, 1999, by Gail Simone, in response to a 1994 Green Lantern comic where Kyle Rayner's girlfriend, Alex DeWitt, is killed by an antagonist and, well, literally stuffed into a refrigerator. The term has gone on to refer to any female character who is killed, traumatized, or otherwise taken out of action, not as a result of anything they did, not because of their own storylines, but so that a man can be sad about it. Of course, in comics, male characters die all the time, and even in Ryuki, most of the cast, including Ren, doesn't make it out of the last loop in One Piece. But in comics, and in Ryuki, these deaths and traumatic incidents are treated with real weight when they happen to men. Male characters are mourned. We see people take up their legacy to fight on when they can't. Women, on the other hand, get to be used as fuel for male pain. What's more is that often, when male superheroes are killed off, they're revived or otherwise put back into the action. Female characters and heroes don't get the same treatment. And Eri... At best, she's an excuse Ren has to self-destruct completely. At worst... Well, at worst, she's not mentioned, which is Eri's status most of the time. Eri is barely a character before she gets comaed, and also she appears in 6 episodes. 6 out of 50. She is never framed outside of what she means to Ren and her relationship with him, and he's not even that good of a boyfriend to her. It's hard to care about her being in a coma when we don't really get to see her being a person before that, and it's hard to buy that Ren's primary motivation is his love for her when his most emotionally charged moments are with Shinji. At the tail end of Ryuki, we're shown Ren begging Shinji to live and holding Shinji's hand as he dies. And like I said, we barely get to see Eri wake up as the result of Ren winning. One of these is a moment that sticks with the viewers because it's about the relationship we followed for 50 episodes. And the other is Ren sitting down while Eri talks. The fact that we don't see Eri when the world is at peace serves to emphasize this. She's such a non-factor in the story, aside from as an abstract concept to make Ren a tragic, tortured anti-hero, that it doesn't matter if she's present in the happy ending or not. And we can infer through spin-off content that Eri and Ren did meet again, and that their love story happened. But even in Writer Time Ryuki, Eri gets a couple of sentences about her before it's straight up the most homoerotic Ren Shinji moment yet. This is not the story Ryuki wants us to care about. I think this is especially egregious when you compare Eri and Yuichi, who more or less plays the same role in Tezuka's storyline that Eri does in Ren's. We learn that Yuichi has something outside of just being Tezuka's friend, namely playing piano. And his refusal to fight in the Rider War is exactly why Tezuka is trying to end it. A male character who's ostensibly in the same role as Eri gets to have motivation. The fact that his hands no longer work thanks to a Sakura attacking him is played as a tragedy for Yuichi, yes, and for Tezuka. It makes his refusal to fight in the Rider War all the more noble, since he could fight and get his hands back if he won, and it makes his death the perfect motivator for Tezuka since he's experienced that loss and doesn't want others to have to go through it, and because he's honoring Yuichi's wishes. And we can gather that through a flashback in one episode. When you compare this to Eri, who I guess we know was in med school, was cool with Ren being a bad boyfriend to her, and had to be at Shiro's weird experiment for some reason, the problem becomes clear. Eri, as a character, is not given the weight she needs to be an effective motivation for Ren. She's barely given enough weight to be a character. And when you remember she's in a coma, yes, but she isn't actually dead, it makes Ren feel like not just a bad boyfriend, but someone who's, at best, cheating on her emotionally. Which is better than what happens in the novel, where Ren actively cheats on Eri with Yui, who is Eri's nurse, for some reason. But still, no, wrong. Don't cheat. Which is not me saying that I don't like Ren Shinji, by the way. I love Ren Shinji. Somehow, while I was actively trying to watch Ryuki with feminism brain turned on, I became more of a Ren Shinji shipper than I was previously. If you know anything about me, or the characters I like writing fic for, you'll know that I love throwing a grumpy sad boy in the angst blender. I like making them agonize over their feelings. I like making them hurt and cry and then make out with other dudes, usually while still crying. This could reveal something about me psychologically, or I could just enjoy it. Who knows? Not me. But when I see a dude in a toku show who's repressed, into the blender they go. And Ren? Ren's been blended by many writers far more skilled than I. Most of this blending is about his sexual orientation and his 2002 typical repression of his attraction to men, and yet so few fics actually go in depth about Ren struggling with that while he's ostensibly in a relationship with a woman. Hello? It's like an untapped gold mine for making men sad. It adds another layer of guilt to his feelings for Shinji, because he doesn't just like men. He's falling for a man while he's chained to the person he's supposed to love. The societal expectations that come from that, the inner turmoil, the way he's being pulled in two directions, it works on so many levels. Maybe I'll explore this someday if this video doesn't taint my reputation as a writer fan forever, but infidelity angst, come on, it's tasty!
The impact.
Now, if you watched my Toku Top 10 video, I know what you're thinking. Aren't you the guy who praised Hiro from X8's storyline, even though Saki is the same thing? And to that, I say yes, I am that guy, hi. Hello. Love Kagami Hiro. That's my cat. But Hiro, and by extension Saki, work for me in a way that Ren and Eri don't. For starters, Saki's dead. I definitely prefer my characters alive, especially when they're women, but Saki being dead, and being a death from game disease specifically, works as an extension of X8's core theme. Life is fragile, short, and precious. Plus, X8 is a medical drama. People dying of disease in medical drama is like Kamen Rider characters having henshin belts. It's part of the genre. This also means that, even when Hiro is having his moments of heated drama between men, he's not actively cheating on someone who's in a coma. What's more is that Hiro, much like Ren, was an awful boyfriend to Saki. And oh, does the show ever reckon with this? Even before he admits it outright, you can tell that Hiro puts the blame on what happened to Saki firmly on himself. He believes, incorrectly, that the fact that he was a bad boyfriend is what caused her stress to kill her, and every choice he makes is one fueled by his guilt over that. When Hiro works with Masamune, who we know is never actually going to bring Saki back to life for him, it's stated multiple times that this is not what she would have wanted, and by saving Taiga's life instead of letting him die, Hiro is actually honoring her wishes. And Hiro's guilt over that doesn't just make things worse for his emotional state, it makes his storyline more compelling. And Saki is even given depth in spin-off content. You see her and Hiro meet for the first time in the Brave and Snipe v Cinema, you know she's a medical student, she's heard of Taiga before she's diagnosed, she gets angry when Hiro ignores her. Saki was a whole person, and so her death hits. The impact is believable. Saki also isn't just connected to Hiro. She's more than someone who just exists in a backstory relevant to one person. Her death lost Taiga his license, and we even get to see how it impacts not only her family, but also Hiro's dad. She's weaved into the narrative in such a way that Ex-Aid doesn't work without her. But unless there's a really good reason that Shiro needed Eri to be there on the night his experiment happened that I missed, Eri has no impact on Ryuki's story or themes. She barely has an impact on Ren. There's a clear difference here, and I think Hiro and Saki deserve a little more credit than they usually get. I'm not saying Ex-Aid got this perfect, but I'd say they at least got it right. That being said, all of that doesn't mean that writer always gets it right. It sure doesn't mean that Takahashi Yuya always gets it right either. See, fridging does not always have to happen to a love interest. Sakurai Sara, from Kamen Rider Geats, is fridged twice. And both times, what her death accomplished in the narrative was a man is upset about it. Whether it's Buffa's guilt for actually killing her, or Keiwa snapping into Discount Lord Baron mode, her death is not made to be about her. It's especially weird because Geats made the effort to portray Kakera, who actively wanted Sara to die for the sake of Keiwa's character growth, as antagonistic, and then just turned around and made Sara die for Keiwa's character growth anyway. Another example of this trope being handled really poorly in more modern writer is Kasumi from Build. Everyone jokes about Build being about heated drama between men, including me, but also, Kasumi is killed off so quickly that calling her an afterthought would be generous. I wanted to talk more about her, but one flashback and change isn't much to work off of. Sayoko from Blade was also fridged just a couple of years after Ryuki. We at least get to see her do stuff before she dies, but in the end she's here to make Tachibana sad. And look, I'm not saying that Kamen Rider should just stop killing women on principle. It's a classic trope, though I wish it wasn't, and it's not gonna go away anytime soon. But if they want these deaths to hit, and if they want the angst that the people affected go through to hit, you have to kill characters, not just make symbols. If the narrative doesn't go out of its way to make them seem like more than just machines that increase angst, the viewers have no reason to care.
The side chick. The blueprint.
I knew that when I isolated this archetype, it would be difficult to explain. This is because there really isn't that much to explain. Most of Ryuki's women fall into this category. Reiko, Nanako, Megumi, and Sanako are all in here. But despite the fact that there are 4 of them, I really can't say a lot about any of them. But I'll still try. Reiko is introduced as a competent, capable journalist who's determined to get to the truth about the disappearances that have been going on lately. How well she does this depends on the episode, but I'll admit when she's on, she's on. She's also frequently flirted with by Kitaoka Shuichi, which is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, and despite their relationship getting off to a start that should have never been written, in the end she does accept his invitation to a date. He dies of his illness before he can get there though. Sanako is Yui's auntie. She owns Atori, the tea shop that Ren, Shinji, and Yui live and work at. When she's not shipping Yui with Ren and or Shinji depending on the episode, making choices without consulting Yui in the slightest, or saying strange things for comedy purposes, she does deliver some important exposition about the tragedy of the Kanzaki family. Megumi is also a character in the Kitaoka loop. Unlike Reiko, she is introduced there. She was his bodyguard for 3 years, she's badass in exactly 1 scene, and she lies, like, all the time. Then she gets a gig at Ore Journal because... they hired Shinji. Also, I think she has undiagnosed ADHD, and also, she's really cute and I would like to hold her hand. She shows up in the second arc of Ryuki, and... Yep, that's Megumi. And Nanako... Nanako is Ore Journal's tech lady, and I think she's supposed to be comic relief. I say I think she's supposed to be comic relief because I rarely found any of her antics funny. The joke with her character, of course, is that a woman is weird and quirky, and... that's it. That's the joke. She also ends up in the Kitaoka loop after bumping into him in the hospital at exactly 1 occasion and later being sent to investigate him on Reiko's orders. And that's it. That's all I can really say. I did try, but, well, I wasn't given much to work with.
The problem.
The problem is that these characters don't matter. Okay, I'll elaborate. To tell the story Ryuki is telling, yes, civilian characters are needed, but at the same time, these ones are perpetually locked out of the loop. They can't meaningfully contribute to anything except for the stories of the men that they're attached to. And you could argue that Okubo is similar, yes. He's locked out of the loop like the women are. but he's never sexually harassed, and he's in a position of authority. He's never treated as lesser. You can't, in good faith, tell me he's treated the same as these women. A lot of my problems focus around Reiko, because she's the most active of these characters. Most of the time. Which is kind of a problem in itself. I just don't have much to say about Megumi, Nanako, or Sanako that I haven't already. But Megumi deserved a story beyond being Kitaoka's weird sort of ex. Nanako deserved to be treated as more than comic relief. Sanako deserved to be more than an exposition bot and occasional vehicle for heteronormativity. But Reiko... Oh, Reiko. She gets the worst of it. I don't like that her being annoyed by Kitaoka and investigating Sakura is framed less like a woman's struggle to do her job, and more like a love triangle where a woman is trapped between the worst gay man you know and a serial killer. I don't like it when she apologizes for doing everything she can for a story. I honestly don't think she ever goes too far, but the narrative sure does. I don't like how frequently she's made into a damsel in distress, either. I understand that it's convenient, but it really seems to reinforce the message that if you're a woman who's willing to investigate stuff, you're gonna get hurt. And I really don't like that she requires Kitaoka's presence to advance her investigations, because for one thing, she should do that herself, but also, no woman should be forced to interact with Kitaoka. Another thing is that Reiko's competence and motivations are portrayed as different depending on the writer. If you didn't know this already, Ryuki has two head writers, Kobayashi Yasuko, whose work I mostly adore, and Inoue Toshiki, who... I know he has his fans, and I am the opposite of that. If you like his stuff, like, if it makes you feel anything aside from the urge to scratch your own eyes out, I genuinely envy you. I haven't exactly shied away from sharing some of my unpopular opinions on this channel, as you can tell by the video you're literally watching right now. But this specifically is an unpopular opinion that I don't like having. I want to see what y'all do in his writing so badly. But let me explain why I don't like what he does in Ryuki. In Kobayashi's Ryuki, the women do things. The narrative does deny them the chance to really find out the truth at every turn, but it's not due to their lack of trying. I don't like it when the cops show up just as Reiko's about to figure something out, but at least she gets the chance to figure things out. Alternately, the women of Kobayashi's Ryuki are shown as competent, and then forced to babysit their less competent male counterparts, which is how the whole Shinji accidentally the writer war thing happens in the first place. But that still doesn't give them the necessary range to be more than a mom friend at the very best. It's still rooted in misogyny, it's just a different side of it. In Inoue's Ryuki, on the other hand, it feels like the women are there in the same way that a prop a character is holding might be. Yeah, they're in scenes. Someone might even make a comment about it and the woman does not react. They might even be handed from character to character. And that's at Inoue's best, mind you, because at his worst, Reiko is sexually harassed, mansplained about the definition of sexual harassment, and then negged about her own damn career choice. In the same scene, in her first meeting with a guy she eventually goes on a date with, willingly. And yes, Kitaoka does get a little better at the whole talking to women like they're people thing over the course of the series, but not enough for me to forgive the whole he gets away with sexually harassing her thing. And also that's mostly in the Kobayashi episodes. Inoue's bring us right back. I call this phenomenon the ick. The Inoue-Kobayashi competency gap. And yes, it's most jarring with Reiko. In episode 2, written by Kobayashi, she outright rejects the notion that she's just being a journalist to get a scoop. She's trying to get the truth to the people who need it. And 6 episodes later, in Inoue Hell, she straight up tells Shinji to confess to his crime so she can get a scoop. It felt like I was watching a Reiko-shaped clone. This wasn't the character I was promised. Now, I wouldn't say that the non-combatant women in Kobayashi's Ryuki are props. I'd say they're tools. They can get male characters to where they need to go, or motivate them to do what they have to do if necessary. On a good day, hell, they might even get some exposition in. But regardless of who's writing, they're far from being characters.
The impact.
When you've been around the tokusatsu fandom for as long as I have, which is to say, not very long, you get used to the common discourses. This is because they repeat in perpetuity, not unlike the time loops that make up Kamen Rider Ryuki. But you've probably seen the usual stuff. Do women need to be writers? Do some men deserve to be writers? Does Toei hate women? All this. So, here's my take. A woman being a non-combatant isn't necessarily a bad thing. A woman being a non-combatant doesn't necessarily mean she doesn't have her own arc, or character, or motivation beyond just wanting to help a man. So that's why I devised something I call the Izumi Hina test. Why Hina? Because when I was trying to think of a non-combatant woman who doesn't suck, she's the one who came to mind. The Izumi Hina test requires a female character, and Kamen Rider, who's a non-combatant, to clear these 3 checks. Firstly, the female character must be aware of the central conflict. If she's kept out of the loop for an unreasonable period of time, she doesn't pass. If she's kept out of the loop about information concerning her directly, she doesn't pass either. Secondly, the female character must make meaningful choices that have an effect on the story. If she's just someone who reacts to what's going on, or someone whose suggestions are brushed aside, she doesn't pass. Thirdly, the female character must have motivations outside of the central conflict. If she's never developed outside of what she means to whatever Kamen Rider is happening around her, she doesn't pass. And my girl Hina? She clears it all with flying colors. She knows what's up with Eiji, Ankh, and Shingo within her first day of meeting the first 2. Her choices do affect the story. After all, she's the one who decides what happens to her brother's body, and that means not letting Ankh keep it. And she has motivations that have nothing to do with counting medals. She dreams of becoming a fashion designer. Now, this isn't to say every character that passes this test is good, nor does it exist to say that every character who doesn't pass this is bad. But the thing is, as bare minimum as that might sound, a lot of female non-combatants in Rider don't clear it. And I'd honestly thought we were moving away from this archetype completely after Revise. Sakura and Hana were both writers, so the closest thing we really had to a support chick there was Yukimi, and even then, she sure did have an inner demon in Battle Familia for some reason. Because Geats had its multi-writer structure, and because its women landed in all the other categories, we skipped it completely. And I guess Gottsched had Renge, but she's a badass alchemist who's a senpai to the protagonists. She gains the respect of 5 chemis in her one focus episode, and she does have motivation beyond trying to help a man, namely, getting that shard. I'd say the biggest support chick prior to Revise was Mei, but she does pass. She's right there for Toma's first tension. She's literally instrumental in not just keeping the Sword of Logos from heated drama between menning themselves into destruction, but also the whole saving the world thing. And she's a grown woman who's trying to do her job. And then we get to Gov. Miss Amane Sachika is so support girl that it's been controversial in the fandom, so to speak. And by controversial, I mean that if I open my phone right now, I'll see my own damn tweet on the subject. But Sachika. Not only was Sachika out of the loop for almost 20 weeks regarding Shoma and Hanto's identities, meaning she fails my test on the first metric alone, she didn't even know Lakia existed until episode 24. It feels like the show itself crops her out to focus on Shoma and Hanto's relationship, and I'm gonna be real. It's the first season since Saber that doesn't have a woman in its main trio of writers, and that really is a disappointment. And I adore Lakia. Lakia gave me retroactive Shoji Kohei disease, and now I can't watch Kira Major or Kimiyuki like a normal person. But despite me having a type, if I'm looking at this with feminism brain, there's nothing about Lakia's storyline that couldn't have gone to a woman, seeing as once revenge for their dead sibling is literally exactly what our first female writer was there for. So if they were going to introduce a new character for this anyway, why not make it a female Granude at least? Moreover, if Sachika's not going to be a writer, fine, sure, whatever. In that case, we should get more character development for her. Give her a backstory. Tell me why she wants to help people, why she founded Habipare. Hell, have her yell at Shoma and Hanto, seeing as they were lying to her for months. And locking civilian women out of the loop is so common in Rider. This isn't always played as a good thing. Michi keeping the truth about Yuya from Mai and Gaim, for example, is very explicitly the start of his fall into darkness, and he is not painted in a very sympathetic light until the very end, because Kota and Mai are way nicer than I am. Sometimes it's just a thing that happens. I did just praise Hina, but I don't really think that Chiyoko would have particularly changed Oz if she'd known what was happening before the very end. Like, if she found out Ankh was a bird monster earlier, She'd be like, okay, we're doing Venice at the restaurant this week, so I hope you can swim. Since Chiyoko knowing wouldn't really change the narrative in any way, I can kind of forgive this. Though I weep for the comic relief potential. But one of the most frustrating, egregious examples I can think of is Kiriko from Kamen Rider Drive. She is a cop. She is badass on paper. She is explicitly unable to become a writer because she can't take the strain of the belt, which is bullshit, but sure. Sure. This is never elaborated on or touched on outside of anything except for a goddamn Hyper Battle DVD, but because I'm trying to keep this less who should have been a writer and more women can be non-combatants but watch out, we will accept this and move on, with gritted teeth and clenched fists. If Kiriko was just a cop who happens to work there, I think this would stand out a lot less, but the problem is Kiriko is entwined with the narrative, or she should be. After all, voice of dissent who shows sympathy for the Roidmudes at times, daughter of the guy who created the Roidmudes, and also she gets equipment, she can fight. The problem? She straight up doesn't know that Bano is her dad until near the end. We never really see her process this or how it impacts her. She should be angry. I can forgive Go for keeping it a secret because, at the end of the day, he's 19. As someone who was 19 for a brief period of time, I can confirm that 19-year-olds are stupid, and that's exactly the kind of thing that a character like Go would try to do. But Shinosuke and the Belt have no excuse here. They are grown-ass men who have had time to develop their communication skills. And since Shinosuke is her love interest, listen, I'm just saying, if my options were beautiful purple android boy in a leather suit, or a guy who actively decided to not tell me information about my own goddamn father, I'm picking purple boy. And speaking of Kiriko's love interests, let's be real for a second. A lot of the time, Kiriko just exists to be a love interest to Shin and Chase. She exists to further their storylines. She exists to be a motivation for them to be writers, rather than getting to do much of anything for herself. Her ending up with Shinosuke feels less like something that's earned, and more, well, the hero gets the girl, and also, since we straight up genocided the Roidmudes, she doesn't really have another choice. And that's not even mentioning characters like Shizuka from Kiva, who exists to be a mommy for Wataru, despite being a 17-year-old girl. Inoue gonna Inoue, I know that. But in a show full of things that made me feel more viscerally uncomfortable than any tokusatsu I've ever seen, that should have been the first sign that something was very, very wrong. When I first wrote this script, we were about halfway through Gav, and as we approach the latter third or so of the series, my hopes for Sachika's character development have kind of been dashed. The show itself just doesn't seem to be making an effort to have her be in the main trio anymore. And am I disappointed in Toei for this? Yeah. Yeah, I am. I loved Lupin Ranger, and I know that Komura Junko can write good women, so I'm not really sure what went wrong in Gav. It feels like we just took a major step back. Even in Saber, which, as a reminder, is the only other series of the Reiwa era that didn't have a woman in its writer trio, we still had a female character who'd become a Kamen Rider show up as early as episode 9, and even before Reika transformed, she did do things that directly affected the narrative. I'm not saying that there's not still time for Sachika to be a character who feels like she matters outside of the boys, but considering our track record, I wouldn't bet on it.
The female writer, the blueprint.
Now, I'll give credit where credit is due. Kamen Rider Ryuki features the first female Kamen Rider in franchise history. We had women before Ryuki, of course, and even a woman with superpowers dumping and tackle, but the first female Kamen Rider, she's right here in Ryuki. Or rather, she's in episode final of the Ryuki movie, and she gets a line in 13 Riders. Is she in the series? No, although gender-neutral terms are used to describe Shiro's picks for the Rider War. Is she alluded to in series? Also, no. Does she show up in the Happy Timeline epilogue? It's gonna come as a shock, but no. But, legally, Ryuki's got the first female Kamen Rider. Legally. Her name is Kirishima Miho, and she's introduced as a passive, elegant, wealthy young woman who's the target of a marriage scam that Ori Journal is covering because the boss is mad he can't get laid. I am not making this up, that's why they're doing this. Upon actually bursting in to investigate, however, it's revealed that Miho isn't the target. She's making the targets. She steals the marriage scam dude's ring, and also Shinji's wallet, which, I can't say I wasn't charmed. I can't. I was charmed. When the jig gets up, the real Miho comes out. She immediately blames Shinji for being deceived, and also wonders if it's because of her own beauty, which would mean blaming God for making her so beautiful. This charmed me further. She has a cool action sequence in her suit, which is gorgeous by the way, and I liked her swan monster, even though I thought it was a goose monster at first, which would have been even more terrifying. But, unfortunately for Miho, episode final is an Inoue Toshiki joint. She ends her first fight with a roll. And I'm not the kind of guy who complains about win-loss ratios in Writer. I think that focusing on that stuff is missing a lot of points, and it seems like it'd make shows I love boring. But this was not setting up a good precedent, especially because in the cold open, Miho also gets her ass handed to her. And then she proceeds to get her ass handed to her again, because Shinji stops her from finishing Asakura off. Still, though, Miho, she gets moments. They're in there. She manages to land a punch on Asakura, who she wants revenge against for killing her older sister. She also manages to punch Shinji in the gut after tricking him for like the 4th time. And she's wearing these... They just don't make pants like this anymore. Then she ropes Shinji into being her fake boyfriend so she can get a different dude off of her back, because in Inoue's America, men can't take no for an answer. She thanks Shinji by making him go on an amusement park date with her, which was actually an excuse to try to steal his advent deck, and also tying his shoes for him, which I think is something you should know how to do if you're a grown-ass man, but I don't know, that's just me. But like I said, moments. She actually does end up killing Asakura, except she needs Shinji's mirror world version of himself that is there to actually do most of the damage. But still, she takes the real Shinji out to Okonomiyaki as thanks. I think in another life, or if this movie was good, I could ship this. But alas, after a very gratuitous scene of Mirror Shinji trying to choke Miho out, Miho gets her ass handed to her once again. She lives long enough to tell Shinji she'll quit the Rider battle, and then dies alone in the bushes. Nobody notices her. And just like that, our first female writer's story ends. Feminism win?
The problem.
When I first watched episode final to make this section of the video, I paused for about half an hour after one line, and then watched 4 episodes of a completely different show to clear my head about it, and then just kind of gave up on watching for the day. I was just astounded. Like, up until now, I've been talking about stuff that's icky subtext or reflective of attitudes towards female characters in broader media, but this shit is just text. And if you don't believe me, it's at 20 minutes and 14 seconds into the director's cut. It is something that Inoue Toshiki wrote in the text of this movie. Shinji delivers it like it's something he sort of figured would happen, like some eggs being broken after a bumpy ride home from the grocery store. Being a writer is too much for a girl. We all absorbed that? We got that? We understand that this is blatant, almost out-of-character-leaning textual misogyny, right? We're all on the same page? That is a thing that Inoue thought that the main character of Kamen Rider Ryuki should say. And you know why? Because Inoue Toshiki thinks that women are weak, and for some goddamn reason Toei said, yeah, let's put that in our movie. It's gonna be a super cool thing to do that isn't really fucking awful. And I would really love to say that the film gets better about this from here. I really would. But no. Nope. Kitaoka defends Femme despite the fact that doing so goes against his character motivation. He fights for himself, as he tells Ren like every time they have a conversation that's more than 3 lines. So why would he go back on that? Because she's a woman, and obviously, women are weak and can't defend themselves. I honestly expected to be more pissed off at the fact that she dies, but like, honestly? Girl got her revenge on Asakura even if she needed a man to help her do it, so I guess she has a full plot arc in a way. The nature of her being movie exclusive means that she does not get the same revenge is hollow and meaningless actually arc that countless men in Rider have gone through, and that did bug me going into this. When Miho tries to steal Shinji's advent deck, she says she needs to do anything she can to win, which is Ren's philosophy, mind you, before promising her sister's corpse that she'll definitely revive her, which is like the exact same thing Ren wants to do with Eri. They're really clearly meant to be parallels, and I thought I'd be more angry that the same story gets to be in the main canon of Ryuki when it's a man. But really? Straight up saying that women are too weak to be writers? I was blindsided. They're not just saying the quiet part out loud, they're yelling it from the rooftops. And the movie just goes out of its way to show, again and again and again, that Miho is out of her depth precisely because she's a woman. So like I said, Miho doesn't make me feel triumphant because she is not treated as a triumph. She's treated as an anomaly, something that inherently should not be, when what she deserved was at least as much depth as the guys get in series. It's only through Shiro's system, preying on people who are desperate enough to die for their wishes, that something as wacky and uncharacteristic as, gasp, a female writer could happen. Miho charmed me. She could have scammed me and it would have worked. And God, then, of course, in typical Inoue fashion, she's weaker than everyone else because she's a woman. Not because her motivation is worth more or less than anyone else's, not because she can't fight or defend herself, but because women aren't meant to be writers. And you can really tell that's what Inoue thinks. Miho is a selfish scammer who tricks poor, innocent men, not a hero of justice, and I'm not saying that women aren't allowed to be morally complex. I'm saying that the first female common writer should have been a common writer.
The impact.
Like I said earlier, the female writer curse is a thing of the past. I'm pretty sure most writer fans these days don't know that there was a curse in the first place, and oh, how I envy them. But it's true. Being a woman who dares to wear a driver is no longer an instant death sentence. Unfortunately, a female character being a writer doesn't automatically mean she's a good character, or that she's treated fairly by the narrative, as decades worth of post-Ryuki female writers display clearly. Especially in Inoue shows because he just keeps fucking getting away with this shit. I haven't seen Fai's, but from what I've been informed of by friends and what I've read, women are given the chance to wear the belts, and it either straight up doesn't work or is just used to motivate men to fight. In one specific case, if the information I got is right, we're introduced to a really capable writer in the form of Delta, but she falls ill and is killed shortly after her gender is revealed. And Kiva? I did watch Kiva. I have made my views about Kiva pretty fucking clear. If you watched it and you love it, you might want to skip until you hear the words, "However, this isn't an Inoue exclusive problem." No judgment, I understand, believe me. Kamen Rider Kiva hammers in the following point more efficiently than the most skilled craftsman ever could. Women, emotionally and physically, are too weak to be Kamen Riders. Yuri is portrayed as over-emotional and ridiculous for wanting revenge. Jiro, who is at the center of the scene that made me more uncomfortable than any piece of writer media I've watched to this fucking day, is portrayed as pretty reasonable for wanting the same thing. Otoya and Jiro are always trying to stop Yuri from getting said revenge too, and it's so condescending that I wanted to pull my hair out. And when you bring in Nago, fucking Nago, I'm sorry if he's your scrunkly or whatever, but my dream is to play the softest, most inoffensive rock song in his general direction until he dies. He is so up his ass with his own righteousness that it's grating, and it's never played as more than this is comic relief, and also somehow being an older brother figure to Wataru. But when he acknowledges his weaknesses, he gets a new toy out of it. When Megumi and Yuri acknowledge their weaknesses, they give up on being Ixa. I genuinely don't understand why Inoue keeps trying to write female common writers. I don't think he wants to, and I also don't think that anyone at Toei is making him. Does he enjoy this? Does he get off on it? I'm not an Inoue enjoyer, and maybe the fact that I don't usually choose to engage with his work is making me miss something. This could be a me problem. I am being 3000% serious here. If I'm just not getting some Inoue thing that is obvious to everyone else, tell me. Leave a comment. I'm begging you. Please. However, this isn't an Inoue exclusive problem. Since I'm going to be talking more about Gaim later on, I'll go ahead and say this right now. Minato Yoko deserved more character than woman who wants to stand beside a king at the end of the world, and legally, yes, Zack gets off scot-free for killing her. I love Zack, but, well, he technically does have blood on his hands. Mayu from Wizard is great when she's there, but when her storyline ends, she just kinda isn't relevant anymore. Takahashi Yuya is known for writing his female writers as characters who need to be humbled before they can really shine. Poppy has to be brought back from turning into an evil NPC before she can fight for good. Yua gets her ass kicked all the time, and on the one hand, like Watsonian perspective, I actually really like her and Fuwa's storyline. It's so good. If you ignore the gender dynamics of it, which admittedly I did my first 0-1 watch through. But if you don't ignore them, this man sure keeps beating this woman up. And of course, there's Geets. Geets has Neon. Neon has one of the worst handled stories about abuse in Kamen Rider, seeing as not only does she forgive and go back to her abusive family, she ends up with her creepy stalker. But instead of talking about how what the fuck that all is, let's talk about Neon as a writer. Her dad gets her final form before she does. Her dad. Remember the abusive family that I literally just mentioned? Yeah, that dad. He gets her final form first. Hell yeah. Awesome. Cool. I'm so happy that Geets is well loved and extremely popular, and that is just a thing that straight up happens in it. Thumbs up. Great job. And because so many female writers are movie exclusive, or are otherwise not given belts until late into the series they're from, they don't get to shine as brightly. Tsukiyomi from Zio is a great character, but her only being a writer for a single episode is absolutely ass. Natsumi from Decade is similar. Great character, doesn't get to be a writer in series, only transforms in a movie. Granted, it's a movie that you do have to watch if you want to try to answer the question what the fuck goes on in Kamen Rider Decade, but still. If you watched my top 10 video, you'll know that when I was talking about Revice, I mentioned that Sakura and Hana's storylines were the best given to any female writer to date, and I say that with my whole chest. This is because their stories have jack shit to do with men. There's no scenes where they're beat up by random dudes for the sake of being humbled, and their gender is never brought up as something that makes them inherently incapable of fighting. And comparing Sakura specifically to Yuri and Megumi? My god, she has the exact same excepting that she has weaknesses plot, and those make her stronger. It's one of my favorite messages in Revice, and as I said in my top 10, the fact that that story went to a woman is vital. And let's talk about Renee from Gotchard too, because she is also great, and I don't really like this assumption that because she transforms later in the series, and because she does, in fact, have a male love interest, she's lesser. Firstly, secondary writers being in love with their primary has been going on since Ryuki, as I outlined before. The gender, as Renee proves, has nothing to do with it, and also, if Renee was a guy, everyone would ship Hotarine with the same intensity that they do Chakogami now. It's not feminism to not let a woman feel things. But that's not my main point. The point is, yeah, Renee wasn't written perfectly. As someone who doesn't live in Japan, I was disappointed that her first tension was in a movie, and I didn't like that she was sidelined for so long after said movie. She should have gotten to be Majad in series sooner. But she's never made to be less capable because she's a woman. She gets an arc that doesn't have anything to do with a man. Her suit is gorgeous, and also, having the first female secondary writer is a huge step forward. Maybe in a couple centuries we'll even have a female primary. Just like I didn't want to say that every female non-combatant is bad, I didn't want to say that every female writer is automatically good. We clearly have some ways to go, and even now it doesn't seem like having female Kamen writers is a given, considering the fact that GOV still doesn't. But female writers should be allowed to have the same screen time, toy releases, and good writing that their male counterparts get. The game was rigged from the start, yes, but it can't be that hard to have good female Kamen writers. Revice managed after all. So what's the future's excuse?
The Tragic Magic Woman. The Blueprint.
Kanzaki Yui is the second female character introduced in Ryuki, after the first, a random woman who's subsequently viciously attacked by a mirror monster dies. She is working with Ren. It's not explained in series how they met, though considering the novel, that's probably for the best, and provides a lot of the initial exposition. She's well informed, and more importantly, she doesn't take Ren's shit. On multiple occasions, she threatens to end their partnership if he doesn't stop his jerk-ass behavior. The first 6 episodes set her up as proactive, knowledgeable, and motivated. Of course I liked her the most. Unfortunately, much like the side chicks that I outlined previously, Yui suffers from the ick. And after those first 6 episodes, it just does not get, any better from there. For a long time, Yui spends her episodes either just doing her job in the background, randomly being put in a caretaker role for various hospitalized people including Eri for some reason, being dragged into male antics, staring at glass, and searching for information about her brother, which naturally is difficult because women in Ryuki are denied knowledge at every turn. But still, she slowly starts piecing her past together. Her parents weren't great. Yui and Shiro would spend days on end, if not longer, in the attic of their home, drawing monsters on the other side of the mirror who would protect them from danger. But they couldn't protect Yui from falling ill and dying. But, because Yui and Shiro had also drawn themselves, Shiro got a chance to let Yui live, until she was 20 anyway. The contract was verbally signed, the mirror broke, Yui came back, a fire started, and the Kanzaki parents died. Shortly after this, Yui and Shiro were separated. We know that they met at least once as adults, before Shiro decided to do his whole writer war thing, but even in that brief flashback, he doesn't tell her what he's actually doing. When Shiro and Yui meet throughout the series, he's rarely honest with her. There are lies for her sake, which she does figure out quickly, but it takes a long time for her to fully unwrap her own story. Meanwhile, as her body starts failing her since the contract is coming up, Yui spends a lot of time fainting. She's also shown controlling the mirror monsters, which naturally goes nowhere whatsoever, and later she's haunted by visions of her younger self telling her she'll disappear when she's 20. When she does finally find out the whole truth of what the Writer War is for, her solution is to try to jump off a building, which Shiro does not let her do. It's only by dissolving as her time limit ends and through reminding Shiro that she'll always be with him that she finally gets him to reset the timeline and end his war. And so, we are introduced to our new world. A girl named Kanzaki Yui died as a child. None of the characters remember her. They'll never know that it was her sacrifice. Or, well, they'll never know that it was finally convincing her brother to grieve like a normal person that brought them this peace. We see a photograph of her and Shiro as kids at Atori, and that's it.
The problem.
What isn't the problem? Okay, no, that's not actually helpful. My problem with Yui's story, or rather with Ryuki's story, is that Yui has no control in it. She's built up as special, as important as the person who knows enough to explain to Shinji what's going on. But her choices don't matter. She's doomed from the moment that you meet her. Like I said, Yui too gets the ick, but even then, she doesn't have any real hobbies or interests or things that make her feel whole, even in the Kobayashi episodes. It's true she's proactive in them, but she has to beg men to tell her basic truths about her own damn brother and what he did. Her story isn't about herself, it's about her uncovering what's going on with Shiro. And most of the time, the people that she meets blame Yui for all of this. It's sure her fault for dying, and not Shiro's for deciding that the best solution to keep her alive is Writer War. The fact that Yui internalizes that makes for some really frustrating writing. And any no ways for Ryuki? Oh, prop would be generous. Seeing Yui switch from girl who's at least making an attempt to figure out what the fuck is going on to implied love interest and girl who nobody tells about anything ever is incredibly jarring. There's this one Inoue episode where Ren and Shinji are talking, and Yui is also in the scene, and you'd think she'd be involved in the conversation, right? After all, they're her friends, and they all live at Atori, and they're all involved with the Writer War. Anyway, you'd think that. You'd be wrong, but you would think it. Anyway, after the big reveals with Yui, she's gonna disappear at age 20 since that's when the contract expires, she never fights for herself. She never seems to want to live, she wants her brother to stop. Hell, in episode 47 she says as much. I guess if you look at it that way, the fact that Yui attempts suicide in 2 known loops, if not more, makes sense, and isn't just a woman being hysterical and being unable to handle the truth like it plays out as. But seeing as Shiro won't even let her have that without either intervening before she gets hurt or resetting the timeline again, it feels like it's making Yui suffer for the sake of making Yui suffer. And also, I just want to take a few steps back and really hammer this in. Yui's storyline is so poorly written that her suicide would have been an active choice, and it's one that she doesn't get to make. Ryuki is so bleak that you wish a woman would at least be allowed to commit suicide. She's a prop, a tool, a poor little tragedy, but she's never a whole Yui. And this isn't even everything. Everyone is always lying to Yui, not just her brother. Ren, Shinji, Tezuka, Sanako, this dude her brother used to know. They all get in on it. The writer doesn't matter. If someone made Ryuki, but every time someone lies to Yui it gets faster, you'd finish it in minutes. Like, fuck dude, there's a scene where Yui straight up confronts her brother about lying to her, and he just keeps doing it. Yui's feelings are barely considered on the rare, fleeting occasions that they're considered at all. She gets to fight back once. It doesn't work. It ends in her brother threatening to kill her. Cool. Even towards the end of the series, when Shiro is called out for not thinking about how Yui feels whatsoever, it isn't even her who's doing it. It's Shinji. This video started its life with one central question that just kept running through my mind. Was Kanzaki Yui fridged? Not only would I say that the answer is a hard, firm yes, I'd say that what happens to her is worse. She is an endless pit of making men sad, while her own pain is barely considered if it's considered for more than what feels like shock value. I don't fault Shiro for grieving. I don't fault Yui for dying, unlike most random men she meets. I do, however, fault Ryuki for its inability to even conceptualize a woman who fights back. And a woman at the center of the story should get all of that and then some. But Ryuki failed her, and writer just kept failing long after.
The impact.
Now, when you think about Yui clones in modern writer, there's probably one example that comes to mind right away. Takatsuka Mai from Kamen Rider Gaim. Now, y'all know me, I love Gaim and I love Mai. So why doesn't her storyline make me as mad as I pretty clearly am about Yui? Well, it's true that Yui and Mai are both trapped in a role that robs them of their agency, but for one thing, we see this happen to Mai. Mai transforms into the woman of the beginning, which is in line with Gaim's themes of growing up. It's tragic because Mai did have a dream. She wanted to dance. But growing up sometimes means putting responsibility above what you dream of. That's what makes the tragedy hit. Mai had something she wanted. Yui, on the other hand, has been doomed since she was a kid. If she had dreams, we sure don't see what they are in canon. The tragedy does not come from what she loses because from the start she isn't given anything. It's just Shiro's twisted grief that makes Yui's story happen. Another factor that makes Mai's story work where Yui's doesn't is the framework of what they're caught in itself. It's true that Mai becomes the woman of the beginning, but it's not like it was always going to be her. The Helheim cycle, as shown through the Overlords in their story, always chooses a woman of the beginning. There was always going to be someone in that role, and as the fates would have it, that person became Mai. And let's not act like Mai doesn't get the choice to do what she can, because she does. Robochi Gen, in general, succeeds where Ryuki failed. When he puts a woman into a time loop, she's not going to come out the same woman. It's true that the rules of the Helheim cycle work against her, but the moment Mai knows she has power, she tries to do something with it. And she tries to warn herself too, which never seems to be brought up. She considers herself just as important as the guys in this scenario. And it's in character for her to not heed her own warning too. Aside from Gaim typical time travel making you sound insane, we're shown again and again that logging Mai out of the loop hurts her. She wants to be involved. Even when she's given the opportunity to leave Zawame on the Rainbow Line, as soon as she finds out Kota set her up, she's off that train like that. And Kota acknowledges that trying to do that was a mistake. Gaim makes the effort to show Michi's increasing desire to control and rob Mai of her agency as a sign that his sanity is slipping, and he is making a lot of really fucking bad choices. And oh, does Gaim go out of its way to show that those actions have consequences? It's precisely because of Michi's actions that Mai becomes the woman of the beginning in the first place. It's not a grown-ass man going through tragic grief and gaslighting his sister for no good reason. It's a teenage boy who fucked up really, really badly. And I know that from a Doylist perspective, that was really a whole lot of nothing. The result is the same. A woman loses her agency because of the men around her. But you know what? I'm not gonna let Gaim take all the heat for this anymore. People have written a lot about Gaim's misogyny, and I actually went back and read a lot of that for this essay, but pretending that Gaim is somehow inherently worse when so many worse examples exist feels like hype backlash at best, and a bad faith reading of the text at worst. So, let's look at Geets. Ace's mother, played by a 15-year-old, which is younger than Ace's actor, mind you, for reasons I don't really care about considering the end result, is quite literally an object that is magic and also happens to be mother-shaped. She is literally turned into a statue, and she sacrifices herself so Ace can get his discount Kiwami arms. Girly is nothing more than a power-up with a vague storyline attached to it. They try to turn Tsumari into one too, In the meantime, she's a damsel in distress who Keiwa ties up in the name of justice because Takahashi Yuya was replaced with an AI sometime after 01 ended and forgot how characters work. Let's look at Wizard. Much like Ryuki, the plot kicks off because of a man trying to save someone who was already gone, and it ends with that woman sacrificing herself. But what Wizard does that Ryuki fails at is it explicitly makes the White Wizard out to be antagonistic for this. He fucked up a lot of people's lives, and he's called out for this. Also, it's never kept from Koyami what she is. She knows what she is. Haruto does not lie to her. Bar is in the underworld, but they cleared it. Hell, let's look at Saber. Luna sacrifices herself, but she gets to live on in the Wonderworld thanks to Toma. I wish she'd gotten more scenes as an adult, but also, Saber has so many things going on in any given episode, I can kind of forgive it for this. But again, Doylist's perspective? Women who are relevant in the story in this way have a pattern of not having agency in it, despite ostensibly being the keys to making it make sense. And what's interesting is that there are male characters in Writer who sort of fall under this archetype too. I kept thinking about Kengo from Forze when I was writing this, because he's got so many hallmarks of this trope. But he's also the belt maker, he has agency, and he does come back to life. Philip from Double also has a lot of similarities with Yui. He died as a child, he doesn't remember what happened to him, his siblings are villainous, he passes out regularly, and to save the world he must be sacrificed. But then Wakana gives her life to bring him back. He, too, actually gets to live. Wakana does not. So, to wrap this up, if Writer is going to keep making women who exist to be sacrificed, fine. If the people at Toei cannot think of any other way to tell the stories they want to tell, if it's really the only thing that sparks inspiration in the writer's room, fine. But at least make us care. At least give the women depth so that their sacrifices matter, and let them rage against their fate instead of just lying down and accepting it. We haven't had a woman in this role since Geats, so maybe that means things are changing. Maybe this role can die. And I would really love for that to happen, if only so my girl Mai stops catching strays. But if it's not going anywhere, if we're gonna keep seeing women who exist to be special and eventually dead, I'm gonna be just as angry as I was about Yui.
So, before you say anything,
Now, of course, I'm already prepared to get a lot of backlash for outlawing all of that and recording it. I know that you probably perceive me as a woman, and that I'm putting a huge target on my back for just daring to talk about misogyny at all. But I also want to get a few counter-arguments out of the way because yes, I did in fact think that far ahead. First off, I'm sure you're thinking, well, Ryuki was in 2002. It was a product of its time. You can't expect Japan in 2002 to make a kids show with female characters that are well-written and have plot focus, and to that I say you're right. In 2003, however, on TV Tokyo, a little show called Cho Station Grand Caesar aired. Grand Caesar's original concept was inspired by Ryuki, and it was only a year later, and guess what? 4 women in the main team. They all fight and get action sequences, they're all relevant to the plot, they all have personalities that are distinct from one another, and they all have storylines that are given equal weight to those about the guys. There's even a character who I know for a fact would be a tragic magic woman if she was in Writer, Miss Saotomi-ran. If this was Writer, and she had the same plot role as she did here, being the team's connection to the Warp Monarch, well, for one thing, I doubt she'd be involved in the action in any capacity, let alone as a main team member who transforms. The team actively fights so that Ran doesn't have to sacrifice herself to save the world, and she lives through the whole thing and kicks ass. Meanwhile, it's Akira, a male character who gets a lot of the standard support woman tropes. He falls for a villain and ends tragically, and his role in the team is to be the supportive voice of reason when he gets over that. I'm not saying Grand Caesar is the most popular or influential show ever, especially since most people have never heard of it, but it's always been possible to have strong, well-developed female characters in early 2000s Toku. Even the support girls in later Chosation Trilogy shows still get plot lines outside of romance. And hell, Mio from Justerizers got Tragic Magic Woman written all over her, but again, she's not tragic, and what's better is that her most important relationship is with another woman. Remy from Caesar X's storyline is about finding out who she is and who her father is for herself. Toei made a choice in allowing this. It did not have to be this way. What's more is that if Ryuki is a product of its time, why are we still seeing these tropes now? Our female lead in Gabu is just a support role, and she was locked out of the loop for 23 episodes before she found out what was going on. And how did Geats get away with fridging Sara twice, or the awful handling of Neon and Sumeri's storylines, or Ace's mom basically being no more important than any other MacGuffin and played by a 15-year-old? That was just 2 writer seasons ago now, but if you played it like that in 2002, there'd barely be any changes. If Ryuki is a product of its time, then we still in that time? Did I hop into a time machine at some point and not realize it? Let me know, because I need to invest in Bitcoin and also Apple. I also sometimes see that people say that Ryuki is a critique of misogyny, but frankly I don't think that argument holds up under scrutiny. None of the male characters really face consequences for their misogynistic actions. Reiko finally gives in to Kitaoka's harassment. Eri does briefly meet Shinji, but she sure doesn't know that her fiancé is basically cheating with him. Sure, Shiro screams and doesn't get what he wants in the end, but he's also never really called out directly for trying to control Yui's life, and it's still her convincing him that ends the loop rather than her decision to end it herself, or anything else that would have made to an actually satisfying conclusion to the narrative. It's possible to critique Ryuki for misogyny, but if that critique was baked into the story itself, we'd at least have more developed reactions to what the men of Ryuki are doing, right? And yes, most of the writers Shiro chooses for the war have toxically masculine traits, but they're not treated as things to unpack or grow from. They're just parts of the characters. Hell, at some points, Ryuki treats toxic masculinity a bit like it's indulging in it. I realized during my rewatch that the discomfort I felt over Asakura was the way the show just hammers in how angry and violent he is. And I get that that's the point, but when the character is so popular that he keeps coming back decades later... Y'all remember back when the Hunger Games movies started coming out, and then all of a sudden there were Katniss at the Capitol, fashion-themed eyeshadow palettes and stuff? Which, low-key, was the exact kind of thing that the Hunger Games is critiquing? Sakura's like that. If he was supposed to be critiqued, then he was not an effective one. The closest Ryuki does come to critiquing toxic masculinity is through Tezuka and his interactions with Ren, but again, I don't really think you can say it is outright. He's the one who encourages Ren not to fight and calls him out on his emotional repression, which Ren does not really listen to, when he's not punching Tezuka over hitting a nerve. It's actually only through fighting with Shinji that Ren stops actively trying to make himself violent enough to kill. And seeing as Tezuka dies without successfully stopping the Rider War, guess that means pushing against toxic masculinity gets you killed? And lastly, I know that Shiro is our big bad. He's our villain. It's his machinations that cause all of this misery, and you might say, well, of course he's controlling and manipulative. He's supposed to be evil. And I would say that I agree with you. This dude sucks. My problem with Shiro's portrayal, however, is that it's entirely too sympathetic to him. Even Yui has a line where she admits that she does want to stop the war for his sake because he's so sad. Like I said before, I don't fault Shiro for grieving. I once asked my older brother if he'd start a fight club if I died as a kid, and he said yes. So maybe that's just the kind of thing that older brothers do. And hell, I love siblings, I love older brothers. And I love a sad boy who's processing his grief poorly. Look at all of my faves, look. But Ryuki doesn't treat Shiro's grief like an excuse, it treats it like a reason. There's nothing inherently inevitable about the Rider War. This was one man's choice, knowing that the woman he's trying so hard to protect would reject any life built on bloodshed by others. It is his choice to keep going, to rob Yui of her agency at every point he can, to keep her in the dark about something that she should have most, if not all of the Saiyan. Ryuki never meaningfully reckons with Shiro as a villain, because the moment all the pieces fall into place, he's no longer portrayed as one. I don't want to say he's not tragic. He is, and I acknowledge that. But at the same time, if they wanted that tragedy to hit, they'd make it seem like he loved his sister as more than just an idea. I don't buy that Shiro loves her at all. I buy that Shiro wants to control her. And tying this back to the critiquing misogyny angle, if Ryuki was a critique of misogyny, I think that Yui would be able to do more to stop the war than just ask her brother to. I think it would give her the chance to at least meaningfully fight for control. Instead, we get a villain who's portrayed with far more kindness than he deserves to be shown. Like I said, I'm not arguing that Shiro is supposed to be evil. He's supposed to be, and I do think he's evil. But everything he does, every life he ruins for the sake of his plans, including Yui's, that should not be excused by grief. No matter how strong it is, no matter what the circumstances were, someone that evil should be portrayed as evil. Ryuki makes an effort to make it a gray area, which I'd assume is part of its commentary on justice in a post-9/11 world, but looking at it through a feminist lens, it isn't gray at all. It's starkly black, and yeah, that colors Ryuki for me. I wish it didn't, but it's how I can't help but see him.
In conclusion,
So to wrap this up, why Laura, you may ask? Why go this far to criticize this show? Why make a video like this? How long have you been sitting on this dude for real? And the like. Well, you know, I'm simple. I think that these two things are true. People of all ages and genders watch Writer, and well-developed female characters aren't just good things to have, they're a necessity. I think women deserve well-rounded female characters with their own arcs and agency. I think if they have to die as part of a man's story, they should at least influence it in a way that feels meaningful. And I think that maybe, just maybe, if people see shows with good women in them in their formative years, they might end up being less misogynistic down the line. But also selfishly, I'm really tired of people shitting on Gaim for sexism, and also of people shitting on Hiro for being the way he is. I want to be able to search for a show and a character I love without seeing people mock or wrongfully criticize them, so I figured that maybe by talking about the way I interpret my and Hiro storylines, I could, make people think about it. Ryuki is well loved for a reason. Watching it in detail for research to make this video made me appreciate it more in some ways. Shout out to Tezuka, who I grew a lot more fond of during his arc despite the complaints I've had about him earlier, and listen, Matsuda Satoshi's hot, and I have a disease called secondary writer syndrome, so, you can imagine how that went. And, ooh, did my Ren Shinji brain cell ever expand? I might even write fic of them sometime in the future, who can say? Besides that, I'll always love Yui. I ended up loving Miho so much more than I thought I would, despite her unfair treatment, and when Reiko gets to shine, she's awesome. I still really love Emperor's storyline, because it hits home for me for personal reasons, and Megumi... Well, one thing about Inoue women named Megumi is that I will fall in love with them and wish I could get them out of there. It has happened twice. I don't want to outright say that I hate Ryuki, because I've watched Writer I Hate, and I know how that feels. And I know that when I hate something, I don't want to engage with it at all. And also, I love Revice. I'm the Revice guy. I am known for loving Kamen Rider Revice a lot, and every goddamn day it seems like someone invents a new reason to hate it. It sucks. I don't want to yuck someone's yum just for the sake of it. But at the same time, I can't give it the praise other people do, and I figured that maybe by seeing the reason why in depth like this, I'd accomplish something? I don't know. At the very least, I hope that me being brave enough to do this means other people feel a little bit braver too. So if you've got a hot take or something that's been bugging you about a Kamen Rider series, post it on twitter.com or whatever. After all, I am putting my real and actual face while I'm criticizing what some people believe to be the GOAT. Like I said, I'm gonna be getting some serious packages. Please don't hurt me. But ideal outcome? Somehow this gets to Toei, and when Kamen Rider 2025 starts, we'll see they've taken notes. This isn't gonna happen, of course, but it's nice to imagine. And now that I have sounded like a 12-year-old boy for more than an hour straight, thank you for watching this video. In the description, you can find a link to my Linktree that's going to have everywhere that you can find me online, including my Buy Me a Coffee and my shirt store. So if you want to contribute to the fund that I will inevitably need when the writer fans find me, feel free. Aside from that, if you liked this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, but feel no pressure to do so. I plan to have another cover up in June, because, my birthday month and everything. I plan to have another video essay up in August, and I hope that you're looking forward to it. This video was a lot of effort, and if you watched to the end, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And until next time, bye-bye! You don't usually see fuck. And you don't usually see characters fuck because the target audience for Kamen Rider is 9-year-old boys. But he's Neville? Oh no. No wonder Ryuki's bed was written by a TERF. When you've been in as decades worth of Honore Decado. I genuinely don't know. I just fucking what? Skeet has Neon. Fuck. A random woman who subsequently... Fuck. This video started its life... And that was a mistake. When you think about Yui clones and fuck, dude. What? Moreover, if such a... When I first watched episode final to make the fucking... Second test. This video brought to you by Cola Flavored Celsius and Spite.